Today on the Skid Factory, we're going to talk about the highs and lows of building a tough streeter. Welcome back to the Skid Factory. Today we're just going to have a bit of a look over the build of the Crown and talk about what went right, what went wrong, what I like, what I don't like, and what's going to happen from here. If you haven't watched the whole series or you've forgotten, click up here to remind yourself. This is my 1968 Toyota Crown Series 1. I bought this in 2008. I put a 2JZ in it, did some burnouts in the shed, painted it, parked it, left it in the shed for 10 years, and eventually fitted a 454 big block Chev with a Harrop TVS 2650 supercharger. Like most projects, building a car of this caliber is a huge commitment. It takes both a lot of time and expertise and also a lot of money as well, of course. We did have our fair share of problems with it. There's engineering difficulties fitting engines and that sort of thing, but there's also just things that go wrong, and probably the major thing that went wrong was the camshaft broke on the dyno at Dandy Engines. And whilst that's not that big a deal to me, because I know that things break and it happens, the biggest problem with that was that this entire supercharger system was built by Harrop as a prototype using this engine, and the point of the trip to Melbourne wasn't so I could stare at my engine on the engine dyno. It was so Harrop's engineers could make sure that everything was working properly as far as the drive system was working. It was an efficient intercooler system at high boost and all that sort of stuff. So that camshaft breakage was an annoyance for me, but it was a very big waste of time for Harrop, and that was what was more on my mind during that issue. So this is where Frank comes in from Dandy Engines. Absolute legend, probably one of the nicest guys I've ever met, and also one of the smartest. He's an absolute champion. He stepped up, pulled this thing apart, went through the engine. Oh look, somehow I was kissed on the dick, found it broke the camshaft. Not that much else had been damaged, so Frank and the guys put a massive effort in and they rebuilt the engine. And it was one of the greatest things that ever happened to me personally, to have all those guys put that effort in, get it sorted, and basically we come back the next day and the engine was on the dyno, it performed. I was relieved, the Harrop engineers were happy that everything worked, and we all went home smiling. So big thanks to both Frank and the crew at Dandy Engines, and also the team at Harrop. Those guys it's a fantastic company. They're super committed to the craft, and we should be proud to have Australian companies like that are putting out world-class products like this. This will be available as a production item soon. I don't know exactly when, but obviously there's a bit more to do after the prototype stage, but super happy with it. This thing is very angry. I've never had a supercharged big capacity engine before, and you can really see how addictive it is. It's a heap of fun. It sounds awesome. Everybody looks at you if you're into that sort of thing, and I'm really looking forward to getting all the other stuff sorted so I can just go out cruising with it with the family and Woody and my mates. Another big difficulty of the project was fitting the engine in with the steering and suspension system. So the engine fitted in there, no problem at all, and mounted it up just using some tough mounts. That wasn't a problem, but the steering position of the Crown was incompatible with the way Chevy does their oil pump, which is inside the sump. So you can't really change where that oil pump is, you can't move it or anything like that, and it was sort of right where it shouldn't be as far as the steering shaft went. So it we tried to work around that with cutting up sumps and stuff like that. So there was a lot of prototyping that you probably didn't see that's now in the scrap bin, but ended up having no choice but to move the steering in front of the axle line, which is where just about every Chevrolet vehicle positions it, and that's why the oil pump's in the back. So once we decided to do that, I got some advice from the guys at Hopper Stoppers regarding the suspension design or the revision of it. The original owner of Hopper Stoppers has a lot of experience in engineering back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and had a lot of ideas for me, and we did actually end up going with a lot of his ideas for suspension redesign. Most of the parts are original Crown. We just sort of move things around. The rack is a Tirana rack, which is obviously a commonly used thing in the hot rod scene as well. And the biggest sort of hurdle you've got to go through when you change to a steering rack is getting the steering arm shape right. And we went through that in an episode, showed you what was up, why you need to get it right. So once we got the steering shape correct by cutting up and welding and testing and repeating, I then took that steering arm with us to Melbourne and gave it to Luke from AIC, and he did a 3D scan on it and converted it into like a 3D model, which could then be first of all 3D printed, which Luca from Clueless Creations did for us. He 3D printed it, then we test fitted it, made a few changes to it, and then it was basically machined out of 4140 or something chromoly, a material that was suitable for the task. So they've either got to be forged or machined from billet. So that was quite a big job, and Dominic from Makerspace, which is located in the same building as Luca, he took on the task. He does niche jobs like that most engineering companies don't want to do. So it was a pretty big job. It's not the cheapest of tasks, but if you want to mess around with silly stuff like that, you've got to pay. So it came out awesome, and it does steer and brake really well. Like it's better than it was when it was from factory, of course, which wasn't probably not that good, but I'm very happy with the way it steers. It doesn't have any issues with bump steer or anything like that. It just drives like a normal older car, so I'm pretty stoked with that. So yeah, a lot of input from various people has gone into that, because I don't know everything, and I'm trying to learn, and that requires you to ask questions from other people who do know. Just to make the project a little bit harder for ourselves, we imposed ourselves a deadline, which was to get the car finished before my son Gus's formal, or for that purpose, to, chauffeur him to the formal. So that gave us an end date, which we had to work with. To try and prepare for that, I tried to organise most of the major parts beforehand. So the transmission came from Hughes Performance in Arizona. It's a Power Glide with a reed case. It's basically everything's brand new inside it. It's a beautiful thing. The converter's from them as well. Fortunately, because it's a big block Chev, it's pretty easy for those guys to spec a transmission that's going to do exactly the right thing for this engine. So, not surprisingly, it pretty much does that. It's only got 2 speeds because it's a 2-speed Power Glide. So it's either lots of burnouts or driving fast. That's the 2 gears. And backwards as well. It's a 3-speed. So that's all great. It works beautiful. It's got a transbake, which I may use one day. Further down the line, we've got the 9-inch diff, which I had already. I got that with this engine out of another car. Of course, ended up throwing most of it in the bin or selling it on because it wasn't suitable for the application. And I ended up with Matt from Rogan Industries, redid the housing. We changed the whole back end to a different type of suspension layout. It's pretty similar, but it's just simplified from the way Toyota did it was weird. So we just changed it to a triangulated 4-link, which is a very simple and effective way of setting up a rear end. It's got a 35 spline 9-inch in it, big axles, the whole works. We had a heap of help here with our homies weekend, where the guys all came up from Brisbane and various places and just put a big weekend in to get a lot of work done. Timmy, special shout out for him, got stuck into the wiring and Aaron, of the Nexus R5 VCU. So that's a big dog. It's got 4 connectors on it. It's got about 126 wires capability. It's a big job to undertake. So that's running the whole car. And to go along with that, there's another PD16 in the back that's got another 30 or 40 wires in it. So The whole car's run by Haltech. There's no fuses, relays, nothing. It's pretty awesome. Especially, this is kind of like a bucket list car for me. It's a build that I probably won't do again, and I really wanted all the stuff that I find cool in it. So having that Nexus PDM and ECU set up in there is something that I love it. It's really easy to make changes. It all works. It all makes sense. It's actually a game changer, which is, I know every bloody YouTuber says that about that doesn't matter, but it is a big deal. So highly recommended to get onto that. You won't know what you did without it once you get it. The Haltech PD16 that's mounted in the boot communicates with the Nexus via a CAN line. It is actually controlling, or it's both powering everything but also receiving inputs from various items in the boot. It's obviously operating all the taillights and that sort of thing, but it's also both powering and controlling the TI Automotive brushless fuel pump that we used. So it's got a brushless controller in the boot because it's an AC motor, like a three-phase motor rather than a DC motor. So the PD16 controls its speed. It's also receiving signals from a fuel pressure sensor and a flex fuel sensor that are also mounted in the boot. The TI pump is mounted inside a Raceworks 76 litre fuel tank. It needs to be about twice that big for this engine, but that's another story. All the fittings are all Raceworks, which we use and highly recommend. It is really good stuff. And also a special shout out to Jamie from Raceworks. He's a legend. He makes our life so much easier, and thanks for putting up with us. As you can probably tell by the car being on the hoist at the moment, there's still things that need to be done. It is a work in progress. Now that it's got plates on and I can drive it around, I can find out what it needs. So cooling system's not quite up to it. We've got a plan for that. We're going to get into that pretty quick because that's one of the major things that needs to be sorted to be able to do more testing. The headers I don't like. I'll probably replace them. I bought a bunch of parts from the boys at Castle Hill Exhaust to try and redesign them to be more practical. The front ride height I don't like. It's just too low for practicality, and I don't think the stance is quite right. And you know how much of a stancy pants I am. The problem with these things is there's no spring available for them. You just use a Falcon spring, which is just what people know fits in there and works. So getting the ride height right with different engines can be difficult. So I went for one. It's not quite right. I'm going to go for one above it, and hopefully that'll be right. But once again, I'm going to have quite a collection of spare parts at the end of this project. The other thing that needs to be done, as noted in the dyno episode, is it needs a fuel system upgrade. So I've already got the bits for that. We've got another fuel pump to go in the rear, a 525 to go beside the brushless pump. That'll be staged in. Again, that can just be connected to the PD16 in the boot and staged via the ECU. And I've got a set of 1650cc injectors to go in it. That's all it's getting. So whatever they make, that's all I'm having. There's actually nothing else that I really would change at this stage. I'm happy with the interior. I'm happy with the way the engine runs. The car is comfortable to drive. It steers well. It handles well for a 1968 model car, and it's very quiet. We pretty much just bombed it with car builders stuff in the interior, which I've never done before. And this engine is not quiet on the outside. People comment on it being incredibly loud when you pull up next to them, but inside the car it's actually really quiet. It's very comfortable to drive, and it's pretty much how I wanted it. So really happy with the interior. Chris from Image Army redid most of the interior. We did keep the front seats because they were in really good condition for 50 something years old. We also had a dash cluster made or designed by Luca from Clueless Creations to fit a Haltech dash and Haltech keypad. So it's all really simple in there and effective. The dash shows you everything you need to know, and that key button, there's stuff on that keypad that'll do everything you need to do. So to wrap things up for this episode of me just talking, the the usual question, the elephant in the room, is how much did it cost? And no surprises, this was not a cheap project. As I said, it was a bucket list thing for me. I'm probably not ever going to build a car to this level again. So I didn't really worry too much about the money side of things. But to be honest, there's over $100,000 in parts. It's not cheap. And that's probably why it's taken me till I'm nearly 50 years old to be able to build it or to justify the cost. So cool cars cost a lot of money, but they don't have to. You can build a cool car that costs bugger all, but this sort of car, it's expensive. But if you got the cash and that's what you want, then that's what you spend it on. So you still got to plan well. I guess the other thing is that that's not including labour. So you might have to double that if you want to build something like this. So probably get onto the trading post or marketplace and buy someone else's project because it's much cheaper.
Who the hell uses a trading post anymore?
Yeah, that's a bit of a kickback from the olden days, isn't it?
Trade me, bro.
Buy Trade Me and go out and buy some
Buy
DX.
Am I going to find this thing on Marketplace in a week's time or what?
No, not this one. I never put anything on Marketplace anyway, but no, I'm not selling this. Some of the cars we build, I was always going to sell. It's kind of like we do this for a living, so we have to build cars and you can't keep them all, but this car is a keeper. It's not going anywhere out of my family anytime soon, not while I'm around. Obviously, I'll pass it on to the boys if and when they show interest in it. But yeah, other than that, it's going nowhere. It might have a different engine or a different gearbox or a different diff or who knows. With me,
engine.
I change my mind or get excited about things and things can change. But at the moment, I'm super stoked with it. It's quite the experience. It's a really, you feel this thing when you're driving it. It's a lot of fun. So once again, thanks to everyone who helped through this. There's so many people. I really appreciate it. And thanks to Woody. This probably would have never got finished if it wasn't for Woody. He was pretty much the driving force, like cracking the whip behind me. And the fact that it sat in the shed painted for 10 years before gives you a bit of an idea of that's what actually was needed. I needed someone to kick my ass and make me do it because it was kind of out of my wheelhouse. I can do all the engine stuff and make things and make everything work, but all the putting things back together, the tiny little chrome things and that sort of stuff was kind of like the computer says no for me. So it's all done now. Thanks for everyone for helping and thanks for you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see the car in person, I will have it at Willowbank Raceway on December 10th. We're sort of gate crashing an event, having our Christmas party there, so everyone can come along and check out the cars and have a good time. You can race your own car. The event is Overtaking Lane Christmas Party in conjunction with Addictive Events, so check it out on Overtaking Lane's page and get your entry there. Woody's going to do a shoey out of an intercooler tank. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. All right, to finish things off, let's talk about the elephant in the room. I'm not talking about Woody. No, I just did that for you.
What do you mean?
I'm not. Oh shit, that could go either way.
What do you think? Sounds like a banjo.
Old Al's Belt Band. That rhythm and timing.